Welcome to The Explainer. We're always asking these huge questions, and today's is a big one. What if we could build an AI that doesn't just act smart, but actually, thinks like a human brain? We're about to dive into some seriously cool research that's trying to close that massive gap between artificial intelligence and the incredible, messy, amazing thing that is the human mind.
So, let's kick things off with the core puzzle. Think about this. In neuroscience, we can literally look at the physical wiring of a brain, all the different regions, and get a pretty good idea of how it works. But then you look at an AI. Even when it's doing incredible things, what's going on inside is often a complete mystery. So why is that? Why can't we map a brain but not an AI?
And this slide right here lays out the problem perfectly. You've got these two different worlds. On the one hand, you have neuroscience, where the whole idea is that structure reveals function. You map the pathways, you see the regions, and you can understand what the brain is doing. But on the other hand, you have AI, which is so often what we call a black box. We know the input, we see the output, but how it actually got there, that's the mystery.
Okay, so this is where the research gets really, really clever. Instead of just trying to build an AI to be great at some task, these scientists flipped the script. They asked a totally different question. What would happen if we built an AI from scratch, but we forced it to play by the same physical rules, the same limitations as a real biological brain?
And this, right here, is what they came up with. It's called Brain RNN. Now, this is not your average neural network. Just look at the model. See all those little dots? Those are the network's neurons, and they aren't just floating around in some abstract digital space. No, they are physically arranged on a 3D hemisphere, just like the human cortex. You've got visual units in the back, motor units up front, and these association units connecting everything.
So how do you make an AI brain-like? Well, the researchers gave it three simple but really powerful rules. First, that spatial layout we just saw, every single unit has a fixed address. Second, I/O zones. Just like our brains have specific areas for seeing and moving, this AI has dedicated spots for input and output. And third, and you've got to remember this one because it's the key, a wiring cost. Making connections isn't free.
To really get your head around this, just picture a city. A normal AI? That's like a city with instant teleportation. Information can zap from any point to any other point, zero cost, zero effort. But a brain is like a real city. It has to actually build roads, and building those long cross-country highways, that's expensive. That cost is everything. Which, of course, leads us to the central question of the whole experiment. If making those connections actually costs the system something, how does that change how the network builds itself? What happens when you start turning up the cost of those long-distance highways? And the result is, it's pretty much exactly what you'd think would happen. As the researchers cranked up that wiring cost, the network started to get rid of its most expensive connections, those really long-distance ones. It basically prunes itself to become more efficient, to save energy, just like a real brain does. But who pays the price for all this efficiency? This chart breaks it all down. The connections for the basic stuff, seeing and acting, visual and motor, they stay pretty strong. The AI obviously needs those. But look at the connections between the association units. These are the parts that are supposed to be doing the more complex integrative thinking, and they just drop off a cliff. To save energy, the network sacrifices its own higher-level thinking connections.
And that has a really fascinating side effect. For simple, straightforward tasks, this new, leaner network performs great, no problem. But when you give it something complex, a task that requires a more nuanced decision, its performance totally tanks. This shows a direct trade-off between that expensive long-range wiring and the ability to do complex cognitive work.
Okay, so let's just pause here. The big takeaway so far is that by adding just a few biological rules, this AI organized itself in a way that looks and acts a lot like a brain. It even developed that same trade-off between being efficient and being able to think deeply. So that leads to the next big question. If it's structured like a brain, can we actually analyze it like one?
And the answer is a huge yes. And this right here is the first absolutely mind-blowing result. Just look at these two maps. On the left, that's the structural wiring of a real human brain, taken from an MRI. And on the right, that's the wiring map that Brain RNA developed all by itself. I mean, the resemblance is just uncanny. Nobody told it to do this. Just by following those simple rules, the AI grew a physical blueprint that looks remarkably like ours.
But wait, it gets even better.
This isn't just about the physical wires, it's about how the thing actually works. On the left, you're seeing well-known functional networks in the human brain. These are groups of regions that team up to get stuff done. And on the right, those are the functional modules that just emerged on their own in brain RNA. The AI self-organized into these distinct functional neighborhoods that are a dead ringer for the organization of our own cortex. It's just incredible.
And this is where we see the real power of this whole thing. It's not really just about building a smarter AI. Brain RNL is what scientists call an in silico experiment, basically a digital laboratory for the brain. We can now test theories about how our brains get organized. We can tweak the rules. We can even simulate what might happen during a disease, all in a way that's totally impossible to do with a living person.
So, let's wrap this up. Why does all this matter? Well, first, it finally starts to crack open that black box of AI we talked about, letting us see the why behind what it's doing. Second, it gives us this beautiful, direct link between physical form and actual function. And third, and this might be the most important part, it gives neuroscientists an amazing new tool to understand our own brains, both in health and in disease.
All of this work really leaves us with one final, pretty deep question to think about. To truly understand ourselves and that 3-pound universe sitting inside our skulls, do we first have to learn how to build ourselves from the ground up?